All right. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that the coffee break helped you get back some energy. I know it's a very warm room in here, but a very warm session because we're going to talk about online secondary education as pathway to study abroad. And well, as you probably understand, online secondary education is an increasingly popular and also very effective solution for prospective international students to prepare them for their studies overseas and increase their chances to enroll at the right institution. I'm sure the three speakers here on my left will agree with that. And those three are Courtney Gillen. She's the Head of Global Business Development at Educate Online. Dwayne Matthews, Head of School Innovation and Partnerships at the Ontario Virtual School, home game for you. And Eddie Mendes from Head to Canada Intercambio. Courtney, floor is yours.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, yes. Well, thank you for coming. It's nice to be back in person and to see everyone face to face. I know it's been a couple of years before we've been venturing to these events, and life had changed quite a bit. So it's nice to be back in person. And I think we have a kind of similar view to maybe what students have when they're thinking about online or in-person education. And so online does have a lot of benefits, and we're going to explore those today. And also the ability to extend after online into an in-person environment. So once you're getting ready to transition to study abroad. So I'm just going to touch on briefly just a few things. So one of the reasons why online, if you think of the internet is kind of borderless. It's available anywhere. So why shouldn't education be available to everyone? We have students in Nigeria and Kenya, China, all over the world who might not otherwise have the opportunity for an international education if they were to try and apply for a study permit to study abroad. Or potential financial issues that they can't afford to study abroad. So being able to offer a quality kind of international education online helps those students, but it also prepares students for their overseas studies. And so a couple of the programs that we offer, and we'll talk a little bit about these today in our panel discussion, but university pathway programs, career counseling, hybrid learning, mental health and wellness. IB diploma is now fully available online where it wasn't available previously, school partnerships, etc. And so some of the benefits, and we've got some statistics here as well, but one of my favorite benefits of an online program is if you think if you're sending a student to South Dakota or sending a student to small town Florida, the teachers that are going to be teaching that student often will come from that local area. So they may not have quite the same international view that a teacher might have online. And so in terms of our faculty, we have the ability to kind of select faculty from around the world and have those faculty leading our lessons. So we have teachers from the UK, from the US, from Canada, from New Zealand. And so those teachers are able to bring their experience worldwide into the classroom. Flexibility. So of course, programs are available. You can do part-time, full-time, but also in terms of 24/7 availability. And so students in Brazil, for example, might want to study the early morning section, so from 7 to noon, or the afternoon or the evening, and that's available. Weekends also. All of the programs are international, and so that means that students are getting prepared for that study abroad experience. So they're getting a head start on their kind of Western education learning. So when they get into the classroom in physical space, whether it's in high school or in university, they're more prepared for what they're going to experience. Cost savings, this is huge. To study abroad, so if you were to come study in Canada, for example, it might cost you between $25,000 and $80,000 a year for a high school education. And studying online can cost you between $4,000 and $8,000 a year. So it's a huge savings for families. A lot of program and course variety. So we've got over 200 different subjects, for example, for students to choose from. So in systems like Brazil, where there's very limited choice as to what you can study, doing an online class in something like Intro to Nursing or cybersecurity or robotics can help extend that child's portfolio when they're going into university. Learner engagement, AI, and we'll call on Dwayne to talk a little bit more about this later. Is same with AR and VR. And then hard and soft skill development. So I often find when meeting with students, I've lived in Japan and Korea and China, and meeting with students there, they don't quite have the same soft skills or the same hard skills that students in Western countries do. And so learning time management, learning how to think creatively, all these sorts of things that come really in handy are taught in online programs. And then a few statistics, learner retention, there's been studies done and it's much higher. So 25 to 60% for online versus 8 to 10% in a traditional setting. And the reason for this, I think the majority of the reason is that students have access to lessons continually. So they take the lesson online and they can be fully engaged in that lesson. They're not worrying about taking notes. They're not worrying about digesting the content at that time. They have access to the notes, they have access to the lessons, and they can read that and see that over and over again. So I think that really helps them. And it also leads to their scores being higher. So on average, they're 15 to 30% higher than public school students. And this statistic comes from the US, but I think the same kind of theory applies there. If they're able to have access to all of these notes and lectures that they can watch over and over again, they're being able to engage with the content a little bit better. 81% of US college students attribute improved grades to online learning. I think, again, the same principle applies. I remember being in university and you're kind of trying to madly write notes and you're borrowing from friends and you're trying to study for the exams and it's just kind of all lost, broken telephone type idea. So to have that accessibility to those things really makes a difference. And currently in the US, there's 2.5 million students studying online. So that's about 477 virtual schools. And we do just see that number is going to continue to grow. So in terms of how big is the e-learning market, now e-learning could be K-12, it could be college, university, corporate. In 2014, it was 165 billion. And it's projected to be 405 billion by 2025. And so it's hugely growing over time. And I know that Dwayne's going to talk about that when we get into the panel discussion. But it's something that is projected to be a part of our lives until the end of time, basically. So in terms of commercial opportunities for agents, if we look at the K-12 online kind of student journey, you might meet a student or a client when they're 8 years old. I've been at education fairs in Vietnam or Thailand, and a little kid comes up and they want to practice their English, and they're like, I'm ready to go abroad. And it's kind of, well, you can't. You need to wait another 8 years. And so this is a good opportunity for you to bring that client into your network early. And so if they come to you at 8 years old and say, I want to do this, say, great, well, we can start to prepare for your time overseas by doing a little something online. And so a lot of the schools will offer primary, middle school, and secondary programs, summer programs, basically anything that you can think of that would be in a traditional school, you can find online. So extracurricular, university pathways, career counseling, it's all available. And then if you have that student who's going to do their secondary education abroad, say they're coming to Canada or the US, why not tack on a little bit of an add-on? So if they're getting ready to come abroad, get them some ESL lessons to start. If they're doing the IB diploma program, organize some tutoring on the side so that they can get ready. Any sort of extracurricular development. If they're going to apply to a US university, they're going to need to start working on their extracurriculars, capstone projects, that sort of thing. And so online programs can help with those things. So it's a great add-on to your students. And then local school engagement. So Ederson, this is how Ederson and I met at an event, and we were talking about doing the dual diploma. And so there's a diploma option in both the US and Canada. And so students can study at their local school. So in this case, in Brazil, they can take the full Brazilian curriculum. By taking 6 additional courses in the US, they can get a US diploma. And so when that student's applying to a university abroad, they can go and say, I've got a US diploma and I've got my diploma from Brazil. So it's a huge selling point. And they can do those 6 classes over 3 years. So we can spread it out. Or they can do it in a year if they're geniuses. And we'll talk more about, Dwayne's going to tell us more about the dual diploma program available at OVS as well. And so in terms of money, achievable commission, obviously we're not all here for the money. We wouldn't be in education otherwise. We might be selling other things. It's more about the student experience, but commission, of course, and being able to do our jobs and being able to do well does come into play. So programs pay typically between 10 and 25% commission. And if we look at, this is just Educate Online figures. So we bring in about $500,000 in tuition revenue a month. If you break that to 10 to 25%, it's about $50,000 to $125,000 that we're paying out in commission. So there is money to be earned. And I think the bonuses here is that there's always add value on online programs for students. And it's also a good way to do business and have that client for an entire life cycle. Polls. So on your chair or on the chair next to you, everyone has a little card, and we've got 2 poll questions. So if you just open your camera on your phone and you scan the QR code, you'll be able to open the live poll question. And so we're doing this both virtually and here in person. And so I'll bring us to the first question. So the first question is, will universities value the online secondary diploma equal to an in-person equivalent? So let's see. Absolutely. Good. I like those results. I don't like that absolutely is coming down a little bit, but it is true. Schools like Harvard do accept an online transcript. The transcripts mention the name of the school. They don't mention whether it's online or in person. There's really no difference. For example, one of our partners is Braemar College. They have a physical campus. They have an online campus. There's no difference in terms of how the universities will look at that. So absolutely is a good answer. Probably might come into play if you're looking at countries outside of Canada and the US. So if you're looking at the UK or into Europe, then we'd want to do a little bit more investigation to see local policies there. But we haven't found any that our students have wanted to apply to that have been an issue as yet. Okay, next one, poll number 2. Over the next year, what percentage of your business do you expect to generate from online or hybrid learning? So hybrid might be they're taking a course on the side and online, fully online. That's, it's pretty good. Can the 81 to 100% please raise your hands so I can see you after this? But yeah, those are good results. I'm happy to see that this is growing a little bit. When the pandemic first came, it was a slog to get people interested in online because schools were not doing a fantastic job of bringing themselves online. Whereas, purpose-built schools like OVS were built for online. That's what they're better at. So I think that, the culture is shifting. And so I look at, some ISEF events that we've done virtually previously. It was hard to get meetings booked. This one, we're completely full, all virtual, both 2 days, and we had to turn people away. So I think that culture is shifting a little bit, and the value in online is growing. So thank you for those. Next, I'm going to ask our panelists to do a quick introduction of themselves. Dwayne Matthews is from OVS, and Anderson Mendez from Head to Canada Intercambio. So please, I think your microphone should work. We'll see. Yes.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, guys. How are you guys? Okay, you're good, right? Yes, okay. So my name is Anderson. I live here in Canada. I'm the director of Head to Canada Intercambio, but 100% of our students are from Brazil. So our market is in Brazil. Any Brazilians here? Oh my God. Well, you guys should learn Portuguese so we can talk in Portuguese better, right?
Next time.
So yeah, and I don't know, just introduce
Yeah,
myself.
just introduce yourself and then
Okay,
we'll jump into
so
it.
that's who I am. Dwayne, that's the guy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Dwayne Matthews. I'll give you a little bit about myself. In 1974, a man and a woman fell in love. And no, so I started my career as a teacher. I taught grades 3, 4, 5, 6, a little bit of library. I also did a little bit of technology transfer, where we looked at what were the big shifts that would change the paradigm in industries, all different industries. I eventually came back to education, and now a future of education strategist and the head of innovation and partnership for OVS. Our school is, like Courtney said, is purpose-built. We have about 20,000 active students. We have a 98% university acceptance rate, and we're growing at about 50% a year. And so that's me in a small nutshell.
I have a wife and I have a daughter too. So, if that counts.
It does count.
No, I do, Bella. Yeah, little one.
Thank you so much. Just quickly, Courtney, I said my name earlier, but I've been working in international education since 2001, when I started as a teacher in Japan, and then got into work as academic coordinator, looking at teachers, and then got into marketing and sales, and that's where I've been ever since. And have recently joined the online world because I was quite excited about it. I was working quite in traditional boarding, like boring boarding schools. And the online kind of excited me. And so I joined up with Educate Online a couple of years ago, and we've been having a great time kind of growing ever since. So we're going to get into some questions, and I'm going to hit Dwayne with the first question because I know we had a little pre-chat. He's got lots of great ideas and information. So how do you see the international education market changing over the next several years?
So one of the things that I think is really important is to stop and think first about traditional education and what traditional education is, and then sort of move forward to the future. So if we think about traditional education is about technology and innovation. Most people don't realize that, because most people forget that a printed book is 600-year-old technology. And so it's become so much a part of our life that we no longer call it technology. But we believed so much in this technology that we created a strategy around it, and we called it formal school. And we had supporting technology around that. So a pencil from 1662, a pen from 1888, a blackboard from 1881, and if you're really advanced, maybe email from 1973. But we thought those things were so important that we took our 5-year-olds and we put them with strangers, and we said, you will go to school for 6 hours a day, 192 days a year, because learning this technology would transform economy, and you needed to be a part of that. So here we are in 2022, and we have the convergence of about 6 different technologies. And those 6 different technologies put us at this spot where we're about to go through a transformation already. And the first stage of this transformation is what I call the shiny box phase. It's everything is new, it's shiny. Look, there's a smart board, we can touch it, it kind of moves. And then we start to become underwhelmed. We don't really like this social media, what's happening with the kids in the social, we really need to get them playing and stuff again. And this is the perfect inflection point, because this is the point where we need to start thinking about how do we use this technology. So if we go back to the beginning and we think about traditional technology and we think about the book, we realize that the book has really serious limitations. It's awesome because it allows us to transform knowledge through space and time, but it's not so awesome because we can't carry a lot of them, right? You can't walk around with 100, 200 books at a time, or at least you couldn't, but today you can. Today you can walk around with every single book that was ever printed on your phone, on your device. And that is a profound shift. There's a profound shift in terms of information and in terms of economy. So at the very beginning, when we talked about traditional formal school, we had 98% that was farming and 2% in industry. Today, that is completely shifted. We now have 2% in farming and 98% in industry. And countries that followed along with this convergence had a profound shift in the economy. So here we are again at this moment where we now have all of these convergences around online, around the internet, and it's breaking down significant gatekeepers and barriers. So when I went to school, and by the way, just to get a sense of where everybody's from, how many people are from Asia? Just hand up so I can see. How many people are from Europe? How many people from North America? South America? Anyone from the Caribbean? Where are you from? Nice, love it. Love St. Lucia. Okay, so if you think about all those places, you'd realize that most of those places, the education system was really about exclusivity. Can you pass the stage gate at the end of 192 days? And can you get to the diploma? And then can you get into 101 at university, where your class is about 400 people? And then can you get out at the end where your class is about 102 people, right? So it really is about whittling down. Today, it's about exponential growth and about more access. So online provides more access to more students, and more people have more opportunity. And this becomes fundamentally important for every country and region to embrace. So I believe what will happen is the countries, regions, agents, and people that grab onto this opportunity will see a huge increase in terms of business, in terms of access, in terms of capability. And the ones that don't will sort of have a BlackBerry moment. Does anybody remember the BlackBerry? About 10 years ago, everybody thought BlackBerry was the biggest and most important company in Canada. Now, where BlackBerry was is actually a bunch of condos. The whole thing's gone. So that's my thought. I'll hop off the soapbox and perhaps have you ask the next question.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. Ederson will be happy because now he gets to speak a little. So Ederson, when we met just a couple months ago now, I was excited to meet you because you were excited about online. And that was you were one of the first that I talked to who started to get excited out of South America. So let's talk a little bit about the increase in inquiries you've seen for online studies, and what do you attribute that to, and where do you see that going in the future?
Sorry, guys, but after this guy here,
it's hard
I
act
just
to
don't even
follow.
know what to tell you. But yeah, so as Brazil, as we think about the country, it's very difficult to tell them how important online is. We have the Brazilians here, and maybe they're thinking feeling the same way. But I think we as agencies, we need to put the online in our portfolio as well. And as Courtney said at the beginning, we need to see the online as another product for us to sell to our clients. I'm an agency that deals with Brazilians, and I know how hard it is, but at the same time, we need to think that the system is going to shift somehow, right? So if today we are facing some discouragement from the parents or from the students or whatever, I think in 1, 2, 3 years from now, most of them will change to online. So by now, my clients are asking me, okay, how can we use the online? And for me, the easiest way to tell them is we have to use as a bridge. So they need to know where they're going after the online. So it's not only, so for the Brazilians, they are almost all about experience. I want to go to Canada or US or Europe to have that experience of traveling and living abroad and getting the immersion. And they don't see that on the online portfolio, let's say. But we have to tell them, we have to educate them that it's a bridge to get something bigger. So we are getting a lot of questions from higher education students saying, can I stay in Brazil and, let's say, get ready with my English and then apply for a college or university? And I said, yeah, for sure, you can do it. And it's cheaper and you cannot lose your time. You can save on your health insurance, on your flight ticket, and you can stay in your PJs and, increase your English. So from now on, I think online it's part of our portfolio. And what we're trying to do is, as agency, getting to know more about private schools in Brazil and offer them the dual diploma. And me and Courtney, we are working on that. And I think it's a new future ahead of us. Good
yeah,
enough?
I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
I think it's an excellent option, the dual diploma for, like I mentioned earlier, the kids who maybe can't afford to go abroad or they can't get a visa. It really does open doors. And so OVS is one of those schools that offers a dual diploma. So with a Canadian diploma and a local school, could you tell us more about that, Dwayne, and how that looks?
Sure. So one of the things that was really interesting and important here in Ontario is cultural relevance. So it's very important in Ontario that students have a certain amount of cultural relevance and a certain amount of connection. So sometimes you may go to an international school and all of a sudden your 10-year-old is now learning American history and is not learning about your own history. And so we had a conversation and we said, we will look at the actual local curriculum. We will take a certain amount of equivalencies, but we can create a dual diploma with 6 credits. And so what we look at is we encourage the student to say, you understand your local, there's a local component to it, but really what's valuable to you is sort of having this bicultural lens or view. You should be able to see and understand how things happen in one place, but you should stay very connected and rooted to how things happen at home. And so creating that link opens up a lot of opportunity for students, A, for the cultural relevance, but B, also because it's affordable. It's significantly cheaper to take 6 courses than it is to take 30 courses, and definitely a lot cheaper than it is to go to an international private school. So it creates an option where before, maybe, if we look at international private schools around the world, we probably have about 10 million students out of 1 billion students, right? So it's a very small sliver, but by doing that, we open up a whole other pathway for people to get involved in. And we've partnered with Scotiabank to create a microloan program that allows people to amortize the cost of those 6 or 7 courses over a period of time. And we found that to be very attractive.
And also OVS is quite affordable, even additionally to other online programs as well. So I think it's definitely a good option. I like the idea of a dual diploma as well for countries like the Philippines or India or other countries that don't want their kids to go abroad at a young age, culturally. So when I way back, used to travel through India for high school recruitment, it was kind of like, there's no way I'm going to send my son or daughter abroad to study at 15 years. They're looking towards that undergraduate. And I think if they're able to get into the system a little bit earlier, understand what they're working towards, it's a great segue and pathway into that undergraduate study for those countries. Hold their kids a little closer, similar probably to Brazil. Like they don't want their kids to be away for a long period of time. Next, I want to ask of, over the next some of the misconceptions about online studies. So in conversations with agents or parents, there's always some discussions over extracurriculars, socialization. What is my child going to do? And so that's something that comes up quite frequently. I'm going to get into Dwayne to answer that for us and have a little bit more information. But on the flip side, online is also great for those kids who might be doing ballet really seriously, or some other activity, sports, We've had kids doing ballet, for example. She had to dance 5 hours a day, couldn't go to regular school, so she studied online. So it's excellent for these kids. Actors. One of the schools that we work with had a Marvel actor. And so he was acting all the time, so he needed something to do online. And so it's a great option for kids who need a little bit of flexibility, or parents, maybe they're relocating, need some flexibility in where their son or daughter are going to be studying. But in terms of social activities, I know OVS does have some offerings. How does that work within the online environment?
So this is part of a much bigger problem, and obviously we're not here to boil the ocean. But what's really interesting is we've created relationships with local hubs, and they give a certain amount of flexibility. So if you can imagine, when you went to school, you had 6 hours, and those 6 hours, you're sitting down for the 6 hours for 192 to 194 days, and you were sort of locked in. So there were no options, really. It was a one size fits all. But what we're able to do, because we have so much flexibility, and because the courses are offered 24 hours, we've partnered with local partners that are creating interesting, different kinds of learning labs for students. So those learning labs, actually, just yesterday, my colleagues and I visited a really cool place that was inside of an industrial kind of office building. And when you went inside, there were lofts, there was a basketball court outside, there were kids jumping on trampolines. And so they used OVS as the accredited portion. And then they started to create something that was really future looking and future focused in terms of preparation. So they did things like goal setting, project management, all these kinds of things that you need for future preparedness, but they had this piece as well. So because we have the flexibility, our job at OVS is not to say, hey, this is what everybody needs to do. Our job is we go to our partners and say, what would you like to do? What is an alternative that you would like to create? And how can you create that alternative? The other example that I can think of is in the Caribbean. We have a partner that had 5 students with a model like this. And this year they have 100 students, because a lot of parents are looking for alternatives, and they may not be able to afford the $80,000 price point. But boy, the $5,000-$6,000 price point seems really attractive. So our partners are creating these kinds of learning hubs that can actually leapfrog traditional North American schools, and that becomes very interesting as well. Not necessarily to catch up to Ontario, but to actually leverage the Ontario to leapfrog. So that's an interesting way that they get around socialization while with an online program.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. I'm not sure, Martin, if we should move to questions. We've only got about 8 minutes left, I suppose. Are there any questions from the audience? If not, there's a few other things we can dive into.
I do have a question, Dee, that works. You mentioned that you used to work for international education since 2001, right? What is that got you excited at an early stage for the online learning industry?
Yeah, I think it was, so one of the things that when I was traveling, so in 2004, 2006, India was kind of my market, and I would go there and I would see all these kids in these high schools, and I would feel guilty for taking them from the country to go and study abroad. So I think that was one of the things that interested me most in getting into online education, was that those kids, had stars in their eyes and, wanted to have this international education, could. And they didn't have to leave home, and they could, give back to their country and remain local and make a difference. So I think that's probably what kind of drew me into the online piece.
I find interesting that you also positioned this online secondary as a pathway
Yes.
to studying overseas. So I imagine you still would like kids to study overseas.
I still think, absolutely. I still think it's important. One of the things about Canadians that drives me crazy, and Americans too, is that they don't go abroad to study as often as they should. And I think that makes a huge difference. I traveled when, not to bring up Trump, but when Trump was running for office, I was traveling with a gentleman from California. And at the beginning of the trip, he said, I voted for Trump. Yeah. And then Trump got into power midway through the trip, and he apologized. He had never left the US before. He didn't realize what the world was like outside of the United States. And I think, it's still super important for people to get that study abroad experience. And online is a nice segue to do that. So they're prepared culturally for what they're going to receive.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Regarding the dual diploma that we were talking about, can you give us any? Hi, thank you. Regarding the dual diploma that you were talking about, can you give us any idea of the numbers of students that have been doing it and nationalities, and how long it takes the student to take those 6 credits that you were talking about?
That was
wanna
for
take
me.
that one?
Okay.
Yeah,
So we're growing internationally. We now operate in 30 countries. We have partners in 30 countries. And what's interesting is a student can complete a course with us in as short as 4 weeks, or they have as long as a year. And they can organize those courses however they want. Typically, what we found is students have organized the courses that they're strongest first. They build up a certain amount of confidence. They drill through the quick ones, and then they come to the more difficult ones after. But it typically takes a year for a student to finish that if they're a student, but they have much more time if they need to finish those courses. And like I mentioned, in 30 different countries, some of the big ones that I can think of, Azerbaijan, we now have 500 students. In the Caribbean, we probably have about 150. So it's growing, particularly because of that model and the other model. The flexibility becomes very interesting because students also realize that they can do that. And like Courtney was saying, it's a pathway for them to get in to Western universities significantly faster and cheaper, and having the quality of both. So they can do both things. They can go, they can stay, they can come back.
They can also, Dwayne mentioned they can fast track, so it can be done in a year. But if they want to do a little bit slower, they can. So they can start in grade 10, maybe do, 2 classes, 2 classes, 2 classes, and then it's spread out a little bit more, so they're not kind of super overwhelmed.
Yes.
But yeah, we've got kids from, Kenya as well, Thailand, Mexico, kind of everywhere. around
And
the
can
world.
I add my 2 cents
Yes.
on what Dwayne said, finally? But in Brazil, it's so what we're trying to do in Brazil is we're taking those 6 credits and spread them out in grade 10, 11, and 12. So the Brazilians don't lose their regular day class, and they can stay over like 1 or 2 hours a day, or they can study like 3 times a week or something like that. So they don't get so overwhelmed with the English and all the subjects and all that stuff. So it's very flexible, and for being that, I think it's applicable. Is that it? Is that
Yeah.
doable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So 2 cents only.
Yeah, good. Any other questions? One at the back.
Hi, thank you very much indeed for the presentation. My name is Daniel Emerson. I'm the Director of Global Education at one of those boring traditional schools
Sorry.
in the UK. No, it's super interesting because a lot of my work involves learning that happens outside of the classroom, but from a much more tactile perspective. So creating spaces for students to learn and fail and make mistakes in a supportive environment, typically that's not only outside of the classroom, but outside of the country. I'm really interested in learning more about the partnerships that you spoke about and what the future of those partnerships looks like when thinking about expanding our students' global horizons, as well as what they're doing in a typical school setting and indeed online.
So if I understand the question correctly, you wanted to understand a bit more about the different types of partnerships that can be created? Yeah, learning labs. Okay, so essentially, one of the challenges that people have when they're creating a learning experience, let's say in North America, the experience could be, I don't know, Code Ninjas, right? They run into the problem of accreditation. So people say, you know what, I want to do something different, but I can't because the university is not going to accept Code Ninjas, right? And so we create those types of partnerships, and those types of partnerships allow us to say, okay, if you want to go out and have an experience, so let's say you want to send your students and you say you are really great at something online, or you're great at writing courses and you want to go work for IBM, and you still need to have the accreditation. If you're doing IB, that's going to be very difficult, right? So you have a couple of options. Option one is your school can break out and say, we're going to have a 4th or 5th term, and we're going to try and figure it out in 2 weeks. Or you can partner and say, okay, you're going to work with us, or you're going to work with a company like us. And what's going to happen, it now gives you the flexibility to start to create or co-create something with those types of partners and those types of experiences. So one of the groups that's here, that if you're interested in that kind of stuff, that I would suggest that you look up, is a group called the Knowledge Society. And we haven't finished it yet, but the conversation, I'm sure they'd be happy for me to say, is they really look at how do we start creating relationships with industry, and how do we leverage OVS to allow our students the freedom to move around. So their students speak at conferences, they work at companies. How do they do that and still have university preparedness? And so that's a lot of the ways that some of the top international schools are working with us, is to say, we want to create a different pathway. And how do we create this pathway and get around the problem of 6 hours in accreditation? And they use us to do that because we're open 24 hours a day.
Great, thank you. One further to the traditional boring boarding school. There's another company that did a presentation, I think before this one, before the break, called Virtual Internships, which I think is kind of cool as well. It allows students to kind of get involved in work, and they can do that at the high school level also. So that might be one to check out. I think that's our time, right? So thank you everyone for joining. I put our information up here, and of course we'll see you probably at the reception later. And we're around, except, are you coming to the reception?
Later.
Or are you off?
Yeah, I think I'm off. but-
Take down his email for sure, because he's not here for the next 2 days. But both Edersat and I will be around the next 2 days.
I'll
if
be
there's
here.
anything further.
And my 2 colleagues at the front will also be here.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
For the lesson,